Hello again, I'm Jason Frank. This is going to be a screencast about sort of the behind the scenes happenings of the Ajax call that initiates creating those image stacks and then shipping them over to the client to be opened with the Fiji or ImageJ applet. So I'm going to sort of go step by step. I'm going to do a combination of graphical explanations of what's going on as well as sort of pointing you to the code a little bit without getting too in-depth. So let's take a look, get reoriented at what we're doing here. When we click the Fiji button, we have two different contexts we can do that from, either when we're adding a new job version like this, or after we have job versions, let me pull the app up, like this, we can look at the output images like that. So when it starts off, when you first click it, there is some data that needs to be collected on the client. And one of the things that needs to be collected, especially at this point, because we're adding a new job version, and until we have submitted this form, the input directory is not necessarily known because it is taken from this field. Whatever you enter in this field is assumed that those are where the input projections are. So since you're clicking this before you've submitted this form, that's one of the things that needs to collect dynamically before making the request to the CakePHP method. Once it is clicked, then I mentioned in a previous screencast, I disable the user interface so that the user does not continually click, 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 because every time you click it's going to make those image stacks and store them on the server and then eventually ship them over to the client. So that's why I disable that. Actually, let me go back here. So when I talk about the Ajax call needs to collect some information on the client, let's show briefly in the code what I'm talking about. Okay, so in the file system, let's get everything in view here. What we want to do is, over on the directories, inside of WebRoot, inside of JS for JavaScript, you'll see default.js. That will be loaded every time the default layout file gets loaded. That's because there's multiple contexts that I want to be able to launch Fiji from. So I just put it in there so that it would be available from lots of contexts. And right here is my jQuery method, click handler for a button with the Fiji class right there, you see. And right here is where it's collecting data. Now these are attributes that were placed in the view code, custom HTML5 attributes that then I collect right here. You'll notice that not every view context has all of these attributes. And that's okay. If they're not there, then these just will be null, and that's fine. So if we look now at the actual view file that these are housed in, right here, now we're looking at PHP code. So I can scroll up and you can see. So here's the opening PHP tag. And right here is the menu item. And it looks like I'm using a strategy object to do some of the grunt work behind the scenes, but essentially you can see right here I am giving some custom attributes with needed values. Things like a job ID and a job version ID, I'm going to need that information. So I know where to go on the back end to find the images that the user is wanting. Okay, so furthermore, after collecting some attribute data, here's the call to block the user interface. And then finally, you see the Ajax call right here, passing in data in this hash right here, and then finally a pointer to the callback once the Ajax call on the server has completed. Then this handle Fiji launch ready down here is going to essentially take what's been returned and stick it in this div, which is in that same view file. I'm also going to output some of those messages in the upper right corner using this per plugin. Okay, so back to the slides to graphically illustrate what's going on here. Okay, starting with step 4 here, to where the CakePHP controller method has received or has been called. So it needs to interpret the request. I say here that in this example it detects that it is for the input projections. This was the example at the beginning. Now it does that by interpreting those state information or variables. So briefly again in the code here, very quickly, what you're going to want to look for is this guy, Fiji Ajax launch, in the jobs controller file. Okay, so basically it extracts some basic information to find out whether you're wanting to look at input data projections or output slices. Once it has determined that, then it can proceed to extract other data that would be specific to whether you're looking at an input or an output preview. Okay, whoops, whoa, come back. There we go. Number 5, the controller may need data from the database. So typically I'd be passing things like a job ID or job version ID, but I still need to know where to find the projections, let's say. So if the job is already stored in the database, for example, if you give me the job ID and job version ID, I can extract from the database path information to get me where I need to go. So number 6, sort of abstracted. Basically, the model is going to return that data which it has gotten from the database. Number 7, the controller creates a preview directory to hold the created image stacks. And this is going to reside on the server. So I go to the app and pull up the File Explorer. In the example that I've been running through, it would have been for the input projections, and right here you see, so let me do it this way. Okay, so here's the proj data. That's where the actual input images are. And what it's going to do is make this directory, proj data preview, and stick the stacks in there. So that's what this is representing, number 7 right there. Number 8, the controller is going to pass parameters to a Fiji macro script. Actually, sort of 8, 9, and 10 sort of happen simultaneously. So you need to pass some information to the Fiji macros, things like which image within that directory are we starting with, and then how many images are we going to try to get, and then put those in a stack. What ratio do you want to downsample by? Things like that. You pass that to the Fiji macro actually as a single argument. It will only accept a single argument. So you like stick it all as a string and put a delimiter. I might have used a comma or something. So it's all one string, and then inside the Fiji macro you program it to split that on that delimiter, so then you're back out to having multiple arguments. What happens then is you have to call the Fiji program, which is there on the server. You're running it headlessly. I explain what headlessly means in the overview video, but basically it's a graphical Java application, and you have to do a few things to be able to run it in a non-graphical environment, which is the server, and that's called headlessly. it's sort of like you're on the command line issuing to execute the program. I believe it works that it accepts one argument, which is maybe the name of the macro script, I believe. And again, the macro script also only accepts one argument. It's something like that you'll see in the code. And so you basically, that's why I've sort of put this in like a black box. You execute that as all one big statement. It's like an exec call or something like that to run all of this and create, number 10 here, the downsampled stacks, which I showed you in the app just a second ago. And it's going to put it in that recon previews directory. That's what I'm symbolizing here. Finally, now that the creation of the stacks is done, number 11, the controller is going to hand the view the paths. In the case of input projections, you've got those 3 stacks. So there'll be 3 paths that it's going to have to hand to the view so that the view, number 11 and 12 here, can put those image paths as parameter arguments to the Fiji applet. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. And it's also saying messages. The other thing the view needs to output is messages. So that has things to do like, you know, along the way I check for success and see if an image stack was made, and I'll accumulate those messages that then will be output in the view. So what am I talking about in the view there? So that view is the Ajax view, the view that needs to be rendered when the Ajax call returns, which is this guy, Fiji Ajax launch.ctp. You'll find that in the views directory under jobs right there. Oops. All this file is going to consist of is 2 main things. Right here, if there are flash messages to be output, then we're going to wrap them in a message div and iterate through all of them. And then we're going to make this applet right here. So most of this is static. But right here, we're going to iterate through the image paths that my controller has set and passed to this view. And for each one of those, right here, we dynamically create a param attribute that's under this applet tag. So moving on now, number 13, now we've shipped things back over to the client. So now we're sort of looking back in the default.js. So at this point we are, this callback is going to get fired, the handle Fiji launch ready, because the Ajax call has now returned, and all of that rendered view, in other words this Fiji Ajax launch, this entire thing that now has static values, all of the PHP has been rendered, gets stuck in this variable. I'm changing my code here. Come back. Okay. So what we do with that is we find this div, Fiji underscore div, and stick that stuff in it. And then, like I say, we output those messages in this div. So where is this div? Let's go back to the view.ctp. It's one of the view files that you could launch Fiji in. Down near the bottom, right here, you have an empty div that will be filled in by this call right here. So going on here, number 14, these messages, my cascading style sheets, have to hide them initially, put them as display none, I believe. Now my jQuery code using that per plugin will fade those in, and I've sized them to appear in the upper right corner like this. Then number 15, this is showing exactly what I said. The jQuery Ajax finishes up by sticking the returned view in that Fiji div. Now, number 16, once that element, that applet, has been injected into the document object model of this HTML page, that fires up, initiates the Java virtual machine to open so that it can run this ImageJ applet. And very shortly thereafter, the image stacks are opened by that Fiji applet as well. So I've demoed this in other screencasts, but I will demo the entire thing one more time here, and I'll do it from the same context that the slides did it from, which is when you're creating a new job version. So it's going to launch the input projections. There should be 3 of them. Okay. I'll make these a little smaller so you can see all 3 of them. And then we can manipulate them as we see fit, like that. And there's a projection stack. The other context would be when you're wanting to look at output images right here. And this will open just a single stack. And there it comes. And there you go. And you can see that it's been downsampled. Originally it was 586 by 586. This version is 293 by 293. Okay, so that was kind of a behind the scenes and a brief code overview of how the Ajax call works. Hope it made sense, and again, thanks for watching.